Hey y'all, it's me, Tori, and I wanted to talk about the Menendez brothers because I remember when the crime happened, and I remember it was July of 1989. Sorry, I was thinking 1996 when they were actually sentenced. It took 7 years, but I remember that crime so well because during that time, I was really working on myself in terms of growing up with an alcoholic mother, the emotional abuse, the physical abuse, and what I went through with that. And I want to be very clear that I don't support or condone, the big M, unaliving somebody, right? I don't believe in that. But what I do feel is that in 1989, that was really the rise of a lot of understanding around adult children of alcoholics. And in New York City at the time, which is where I was living, I remember that they called it ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and that movement was really just in its infancy. And a lot of people were like, "Those meetings are so angry." Well, we were angry people, and I think that one of the things that happened and has happened is that some people have been stuck in that abuse cycle. So I'm just going to sit up a little. I'm sitting outside on my back deck. Um, and I think that once you're stuck in that, and I'm not saying it's like negative. I'm just saying it's very hard to get over the kind of abuse that happens in an alcoholic family. And particularly with Jose Menendez, their father, um, his sexual abuse of the boys was uh, unbelievable. Now, some people now say, "Oh, I don't believe them," but there are actually family members and their cousin who passed away. There was a lot of information, and there was a lot of, I want to say, there was buzz. Everybody knew what was going on, but nobody did anything. And I think when we talk about that, it's kind of like the silence, living in the South now, it's just that, well, he's a little touched, and I think there is that, at least there was in from 85 to 89, during that time period, people really didn't talk about what was going on in the homes. And we're seeing it now en masse. But in those days, we really didn't, we weren't as exposed to it. Let me put it that way. I was very heightened, and the awareness was huge in me because I just was unfunctioning. I had discovered a place called the Caron, Caron Foundation in Pennsylvania, and it was the only. There was one that came up later. Pia Melody did one, but it was the only at the time adult children of alcoholics inpatient, a 5-day intensive, and I have to look back and say it was 5 of the most powerful days of my life because I was really able to untangle a lot of the emotional abuse and physical abuse and how, as adult children of alcoholics, see the, and I want to be clear, I'm giving you background, and it is my background, but it's also my understanding and my comprehension of what happened to these boys. And I want to be very clear. At that time, it was just starting to become aware of like family abuse and things that were going on in the homes. And certainly in a home like the Menendez home, you would never expect something like that. But there were homes like that all over the country, all over the world. Now, Jose Menendez came here from another country. I don't get too much into that, but he was really not, he was not, the standard of America at the time, and he felt less than. Okay. Now, that's not a judgment. That was a thing I read about him a while ago. But the point is that he met Kitty, and that's his wife, who was also murdered, and his world just was like, because he knew she came from money, she could give him the status that he needed, and he went on to become a very prominent music executive and very wealthy. The thing that I want to say was hidden inside of him is his dark urges, his illness, and when I say illness, anybody that tries to have relations with a child as an adult is a sick F. Okay. So let's just get that out of the way. I really feel that, and I want to come over to the other side of this. There's been a lot said about, the idea that what these boys did and blah, blah, blah. But if we come to where we are now, especially in the last few years, the Me Too movement, right? Which I guess kind of like faded away because, it's like the old thing of like, we want this when it suits us. And then when it doesn't, we're going to say this. And I'm going to go back using that. I'm going to go back to the actual trial of Erik and Lyle because they were not allowed to bring out the abuse. I think it was at the second trial. A lot of that was squelched. It was just not admitted. And the thing is that when you, and what I'm trying to say is it was good for the prosecution to just hide that, but it was also a bad for the boys. And I think what I'm trying to say is that movements now are like, well, that's good for me. Well, I don't care about whether it's good for you. And that's what happened, I believe, to these boys. So if we look at one of the big things that happened was that Lyle had gone to Princeton and he was playing tennis. And that was pretty much all he did. He was not really a student. He didn't like school. And he had been abused by his father. So being in Princeton, New Jersey was just, of course, he was such a bad student. He got thrown out, much to the disgrace of Jose. And he went home back to California. And that's when he discovered, and I think he knew, they both knew stuff was going on, but that's when he discovered the abuse of his younger brother. And this was something that just, the two of them, it was their secret. And they had confided in their cousin. And so there was actually proof, they believe, and I do believe them, that there were witnesses who had seen a lot of the abuse that was going on. So, 1 second, my dog has decided he's going to go see the neighbors. Hold on. Okay, I guess not. Anyway, so the point I'm making is that when we get into today, if this crime happened today, we would be really digging into the abuse. And I do believe that in their case, it was self-preservation. I do believe that they, the thing of self-defense. Well, think about it this way. Erik was told that he was excited because he was going to go to UCLA, but he was going to live on campus. And then both his parents said, no, you're going to live at home. Now, we know that Kitty also had relations, and I believe it was with Lyle and Erik. I'm not, that whole thing is a little fuzzy because it's been a while. And as I'm taping this today, the courts are going to decide today whether these boys get resentenced. I feel very strongly that they should get resentenced. When people talked about them going out and getting, expensive watches and cars, and Lyle going to a tennis camp and a tennis pro and going overseas and playing tennis internationally. And I really believe that one of the things that we want to look at now is the idea that my neighbor just went by. So I'm like, oh, hi. It's like, this is just a small community here. But what I want to say is that one of the things that I think is most important in all of this is that when they start, because the cops were like, oh my gosh, let me pause this. Okay, so he decided he was going to run after the neighbor. But one of the things I want to say in this thing is that they were denied everything. Those boys were kept on such a tight leash. And when Erik was told he could not live on campus, that was like the snap, because he was going to be stuck in the house with them. They felt he could come home every day, and they would not let him go. His parents were, his mother was like, no, you're not going to stay there. And, Jose was like, no, you're going to come home every night. And the thing about that is that I want you to imagine that every night knowing that you're in school, you're going to be abused and you can't tell anyone because you're trapped. And so the reason I am going into this with you is because there's not a lot of, I'm going to take his collie off because he doesn't like it when we're sitting outside, right? You don't like it at all. So, oh yeah, that's supposed to be torn. I'm sure. I don't know. It's one of those. Okay, there we go. So what I wanted to say about this is that when they went, first of all, they're trapped, but when they went out after the murders, and really the terror of killing these people, I mean, they knew that it was them or their parents, because one of the things, and this is a lot that was left out, I'm going to back up a little bit. One of the things that happened was the boys started to feel like the parents were going to kill them. And it makes sense with some of the stories. The parents were taking them out on a boat, and then they were very upset that the guy who they rented the boat from was going to be with them. And the boys started feeling like their parents were going to off them. And some of the uh, actual events that happened in that time were very much in line with what the boys were fearing. So I want to kind of give you that idea that we're dealing with teenagers, we're dealing with kids who kind of start suspecting that their parents are going to kill them. And every indication did begin to look that way. Like, oh, it's an accident, they drowned, right? So it started to get, because one of the things that happened right prior is that when Lyle came back, they both confronted their father on this. And it was quite explosive. And so after that, you can imagine that Jose has this big, hoity-toity kind of job. And as a result, what happened was Jose has a lot to protect. And there were several people that said, oh, yeah, he's dead. And it was like surprising, like, why'd they say that? And one guy said, because he was a cruel SOB. He was mean, he was nasty, he humiliated people. So all of this starts lending credence to the cruelty that these boys, within what these boys were treated, how these boys were treated. And as I'm going into this, I want to be clear on it and say, I really believe that anybody, and I want you to imagine that you are faced with, you cannot escape. These are your parents. These are people that are supposed to love and protect you, and you are trapped by their sexual abuse, by their just complete abuse, and you can't get out. And now you have a younger brother that is being subjected to that and can't escape. So I want to put that in your sphere, because one of the things that happens is that we know today what we didn't know 30 years ago. We didn't realize how much abuse has a toll on people. We just kind of, you have to remember, we came out of World War I, people survived, and then they're trying to build America, and then they have a depression, and then they go into World War II. And so a lot of this was just squelched. People didn't talk about abuse. They were trying to survive. So they got to the next thing and the next thing. And the reason I'm saying this is that when we got to the 70s, it was kind of like, opposing war, Vietnam. And after that, what started to slowly surface was the idea of personal abuse, but it was not really prevalent until the 80s. And I'm going to say that because it took that many years for people to start really talking about it, because prior they weren't, they were here and there. And of course, therapy was there, but there were really very few laws to protect children. And, the way the laws were written, you had to practically be there and see it, and these are, the Menendez brothers were they were, upper class kids that they didn't know what the heck to say. And they certainly knew that if they said anything, it would destroy their father and then destroy their mother. So, these boys were trapped. They were looking at this like, who can we tell? Where are we going? They're trying to kill us. So I have to say that with all of that swirling in your head, the absolute terror of your parents trying to kill you at that time. And this was, by the way, not really talked about. We didn't really admit that. And there were there were relatives that actually saw what was going on. And, of course, Kitty's brother, and they're going to go, no, it's a lie. And, the thing is that because Kitty was in that situation with Jose, like people call it codependent or what. I think this is a very, very sick dynamic that came together. And you have to remember, if Kitty is part of that, if she's abusing the kids too, even denying their reality and saying you can't say anything, she is just as sick as he is. And now the family saying they did this to her, we have to look at the family in terms of, you know, I really get like trying to protect your family, but the reality is you have two nephews that are suffering because you're trying to protect a woman that did this to them. And so I really have, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. I have very little sympathy for abusers. I really do. Now, let's look at, because by the time I finish this video, they could very well have gotten another sentencing, and I really do feel they should, because all around this country, we're seeing children trafficked, abused. We're seeing heinous things that are coming out right now at the time of this taping. And I want to tell you, I think that what they did was they put an end to their suffering and their abuse. Now, let's go to the past 30 years they've been in prison. They've been model prisoners. They have helped other people learn to read and write. They have held jobs that were really, where they did a great job and they helped other people. They went and got their college degrees. They even married people. They obviously have no contact in physical, but they each got married. And the point I am making in all of this is that if you're an evil person and you've done a murder that is just so like, I want to say like really, you don't go into prison and become a good guy. It doesn't work like that. And I really believe that what they did was something that should have opened our country wider at the time. But instead, we protect Hollywood types who have done heinous things. And I think we can even look at, Weinstein and a lot of these people that we've just been pretending don't exist. And I think that dark side of Hollywood has to protect itself. So Menendez, even though he was in the music industry, we're finding out that wasn't such a great place. So we don't know what else he did. But I do remember that there were people around him that said, I knew that was going to happen to him. Somebody was going to, do that. And so I'm saying this in a way to make it clear that these boys were abused. And even though they were put in prison because they did feel guilty for their crimes, they did know they killed their parents. This wasn't like they went, oh, we didn't kill them. And you know something? Running off to Europe and studying tennis and, buying Porsches and watches, all of this is part of the unbelievable grief you feel. And it's also, you're trying to fill up the void that is there, because when you're abused, and then suddenly it's not there, you break out, you just break into like, oh, you're free in the world. Sorry. You're free in the world. And so what I want to say about all of this is that I really believe that the Menendez boys, had this happened today, we would have looked much deeper. They would have gotten a lot more support and help. They would have gone into some kind of helpful facility. On the other hand, I think we need to start relooking at cases like this where they were really, the DA in LA was just, they had just lost the OJ Simpson case. They needed this case. They needed a big case, and they needed to find somebody guilty. So suppressing evidence and things like that, that doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you? And the truth is that, this was a murder. It was an obvious murder. It was a slam dunk. And I do believe there were extenuating circumstances. So what do you think? What do you believe? I'm very curious about your comments. I do have a request, which is say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. please don't call each other names in the comments, and you don't need to call me names either. It's just not very nice. And I just don't think that it's the way we need to be. If you have a different opinion, just state it. I'd love to hear it. But I think we can all be, I want to say, civil to one another and have some decorum. And with that, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And I really want to hear what you think about Lyle and Erik. And if you want to hear more about things like this, about communication breaking down and things like that, and how we ignore abuse, I would love to do more cases like this. So let me know in your comments, and feel free. I think there's a forum. Go ahead and jot something in there. And I look forward to seeing you guys the next time.